This is a story all about how my debt-free journey turned upside down, and I'd like to take a minute, just sit right there. I'm going to tell you all about the living arrangements and where, so there. I lived in 3 different places while I was paying off debt. In this video, I am going to break down a timeline of exactly where I lived and the pros and cons of each. And if you're on your debt-free journey, maybe this will give you a good idea of what would work best for you. Hey guys, it's Justine with Debt Free Millennials, the channel to help you crush your debt and live payment free. If you haven't watched my story about how I paid off $35,000 in student loan debt on a $37,000 income, be sure to watch that video. I will link to that in the description below. Part of my debt-free journey, actually all of it really, I was in living arrangements where it wasn't 100% exactly what I wanted, but because I made those choices and made those sacrifices, it put me in such a great position to pay off debt. So I want to take you down a timeline, if you will. A timeline of exactly where I was living to give you an idea of whether or not you should be doing the same thing, or if you have some other options, tell me below. I think this is where you can get really creative with where you're living at. Okay, so first things first. In May 2011, I graduated from Kansas State University and I got my bachelor's in marketing. Hoorah, living life. And then in June 2011, just 1 month later, I moved in with my parents and I lived with them rent-free. Now, I know that this isn't an option for everybody, and sometimes just living with your folks is not a good idea, or sometimes you do have to pay your parents' rent. I was very fortunate enough that my parents didn't really have that conversation with me. I didn't have that conversation with them. It was like, you can stay here and get on your feet and then move out as soon as you can. I think my dad was kind of like, go ahead and figure it out. And mom was like, it's okay. Like, stay with us. And so that all happened between June 2011 and January of 2012 is when I moved out and I moved into my own apartment with a roommate. Now, when I was making this decision, because I knew that I wanted to have my own place, the vision was always to live in a high-rise apartment. I wanted to live in the city. I never had gotten that experience before, and I really wanted to live close to downtown Kansas City. So there is an area of KC called the Plaza. Super fun, lots of shops, bars, restaurants, everything's very walkable. And I was kind of looking at that because I was working downtown at that time. My sister had a friend who was going to school there in downtown Kansas City and was also looking for a roommate. So I had to make the decision of, okay, I'm just starting to pay back my student loan debt. I actually made my very first payment in November of 2011. So I was living with my parents from June 2011, not paying, my loans are still in deferment for that 6 months, and then November hit and then it was time to start paying that debt. And so I did that November, December, January, I moved out. So now I have a couple of new expenses. The rent, utilities, all that good stuff, buying my own food, really like 100% buying my own food, and the student loan debt payment. So I knew splitting the cost of having my own place would drastically help me with my finances. So I made that choice to move in with my sister's friend. Exactly a year later, Kyle begged and pleaded. I mean, he begged me to come back to Manhattan, to come back to K-State and work in Manhattan because he was still finishing up his graduate program. And he was like, please, 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 I love you. And I was like, I don't want to go back to Manhattan. I'm done with that. I did college there. I'm not trying to go back. Well, lo and behold, it was like a thing called love, and I ended up finding a job really, really quickly in Manhattan. And a year later, in January 2013, I was moving out to Manhattan, and my sister was still going to school there at the time, so we moved in together. Also, another way that I saved money. I had always pictured myself just getting my own apartment by then, but it ended up working out that she was moving out of her old place, she was looking for a place to live, and we've lived together, well, pretty much our entire lives. So it ended up, we were together, and I was there with Kyle, making our relationship a little bit more serious, you know? Then in December of 2013, after a year of living with my sister, splitting everything 50-50, she moved out and Kyle moved in. Yes, we lived in sin, okay? We lived together before we were engaged, before we were married. And I'm so glad we did that because we split everything down the middle. We were truly roommates. I truly got to understand how he worked and lived and operated and all that stuff, and likewise him for me. And I'm so glad we did that because we talked about finances so much. I was getting this close to paying off my debt by that time. And in April 2014, I officially became debt-free. And then in October of 2015, after we got engaged, after we got married, we moved to San Diego. And now today, we live happily ever after. So I want to go through the pros and cons of each living situation that I encountered through my debt-free journey. So over the course of 2.5 years, I had actually lived in 4 separate living arrangements and 3 different locations, if you will. Yeah, 3 different locations. So some of the pros of living with my parents, the biggest one being I didn't pay any rent, and groceries and utilities were pretty much covered. Did help my mom with making dinners and things like that, but I think she's so used to cooking and shopping for a family of 5 that it just kind of happened that way naturally. And I was living back in my childhood house, which meant I had access to, they have a neighborhood pool. They have like this oversized pond. They call it a lake, but it's like a pond, but you can swim in it. And I had access to that. I also had their neighbors contact me a lot throughout the summer to pick up house sitting gigs. So on the weekends, or sometimes for a week stretch, I could go over to the neighbor's house, take care of their dog, take care of the plants, and then kind of live there, sleep over by myself, and that was actually a pretty good deal. Now, of course, there were some cons living with your parents. I think the biggest thing for me is that I didn't feel independent or grown up. The vision after you graduate from college is like, yes, I'm gonna have my own place, I'm gonna be adult, I'm adulting so hard. And when you move back into your childhood home, it's like, oh, well, I guess I'm not that independent. I think it was that mentality where that really motivated me to get my finances in order, start reading some personal finance books to take care of myself financially so that I could move out and have this grown-up independent life. And I think another con was just the ability to establish my own routines. When you're living back with your family, you kind of go back to whatever the routines that your mom and dad have set up for you, and that may not be the same as when you've grown up and now you have your own routines. So like working out is a big factor of my daily routine. So I think not being able to establish that while I was living at home, was kind of a setback. Now, when I moved in with my sister's friend and we ended up doing the roommate situation, you guys know that there are some just standard roommate issues that you have to deal with. They may not be as clean as you, they may not be pulling their weight, maybe somebody uses more electricity. It's those little things. I never really got that with Emily, and I think that was because she was always gone. She was either at school or at her boyfriend's house, so I basically paid half for this apartment, but I got to enjoy the whole apartment, if that makes sense, because she was never there. Now, that was a huge pro. Another pro was she didn't really care about cable or internet and all that stuff, and we actually lived above the management office, right above it. And we got to tap into their Wi-Fi because the Wi-Fi signal was strong enough to go through the floor. And we just used that as our internet. So we saved a lot of money doing that, and we only had Netflix at that time. So just Netflix and borrowed Wi-Fi. Also, that apartment was very close to the action. I mentioned that we lived on the plaza. I could walk to a whole bunch of things. My apartment was an older building, and it was not cute, guys. It was like metal kitchen cabinet and just funky setup. It did not have central AC or heat, and it was single pane windows, so it was noisy, but it was like that dream that I got a little bit closer. It may not have been the picture perfect thing that I had wanted, but damn, it was close. It was good. Now here's the thing about all of this is I saw a lot of my friends who also graduated the same time as me move into these really nice apartments that has like a pool and a gym, all these amenities. I saw them moving straight into the city, getting a new vehicle, and I easily could have done that. Now, if I would have done that, I know that the financial stress would have started to creep up, because not only do you have higher payments in rent, utilities, and sometimes people actually take out car loans and have car payments, your student loan debt is still going to be there. And I knew that that financial stress wasn't what I wanted. So instead, I made these small changes, these choices. Maybe it was a sacrifice to live with a roommate or to live with my parents. But I remembered that these temporary seasons of life, where I was like, this is only for a short time, this is not permanent, really kept me motivated to continue to pay off the debt so that I could eventually get to that dream place that I wanted to live in. So in October 2015, that's exactly what happened. You know, Kyle and I moved into a really amazing place where we've met a ton of friends that also has the pool and the gym and everything, and we're doing it debt-free, and I have no financial stress about paying for a place like this because I paid off the debt in the past. So I hope that gives you some ideas on what you can do. Comment below, where are you living now? What's your living arrangement? Are you living with somebody to save costs? Are you with your family maybe? There's no shame in that. Each debt-free journey is going to be a different story than what my story is. So create your own path, because even if you want to justify and say, oh, well, she lived with her parents rent-free, that's why she got out of debt so fast. There are other sacrifices that any of you could make that may not pertain to what I did, and that can help you on your own debt-free journey.